In my practice, I often encounter stories where real storms are hidden behind outward calm. Recently, an elderly woman came to see me. At first glance, she seemed confident, but as soon as she started talking, I saw tears in her eyes. Her speech was disjointed, but behind every word, I could sense the weight she had been carrying for many years. Today, I want to share her confession with you. It is a story of pain, but also of the strength to move forward. Here is what she told me. The morning in Fresno was warm, like most days in our sunny California town. I love these quiet hours when the sun is just beginning to shine through the blinds of our bedroom, and Archibald is still snoring peacefully beside me. At 67, I have learned to appreciate these moments of silence and tranquility. My gaze swept over the familiar contours of the room, the very one where Archie and I had spent the last 32 years. Every crack in the ceiling, every floorboard that creaked underfoot, told its own story. The story of our life. I slipped carefully out from under the covers, trying not to wake my husband. Archibald had never been an early riser, especially since retiring. 35 years of teaching English literature at the local college had taught him to appreciate the opportunity to sleep in. Throwing on my robe, I headed to the kitchen. Our house, a spacious four-bedroom Victorian mansion, was perhaps too big for two elderly people. But every corner held memories. This is where our son Edmund grew up, where we celebrated birthdays, Christmas, and Thanksgiving. Here I mourned my parents and celebrated the birth of my grandchildren. As I made my morning coffee, my gaze lingered on a photograph standing on the kitchen table. Young Edmund in his graduation gown, smiling proudly between me and Archie. We were so happy then. Back then, we thought we had raised our son right. The sound of footsteps brought me out of my reverie. Archibald, with his tousled gray hair and his worn robe, which he stubbornly refused to change despite my hints, entered the kitchen. "Good morning, Bee." He kissed me on the cheek and reached for the coffee pot. "It's going to be hot today." "As always," I smiled, handing him a cup. "Don't forget, Edmund and Vivian promised to come over for dinner." Archie snorted. He had never been fond of our daughter-in-law. Vivian Fairmont, née Pemberton, came from a family that claimed aristocracy but lacked the means to maintain the lifestyle. Edmund had met her at university, and since then, our son had been under her influence. I wonder why they're coming," Archie muttered, hiding his face behind the newspaper. "They usually only visit us on holidays or when they need something." I didn't answer. We both knew it was true. After the birth of the twins, Oliver and Amelia, now 7 years old, our meetings with our son became even rarer. Edmund always found excuses. Work at the law firm, the children's school events, Vivian's fatigue. The day dragged on slowly. I made lunch, roast meat with vegetables, which Edmund loved as a child, and apple pie, a traditional family dessert. Archibald went to his study, where he spent most of his time reading and occasionally writing articles for literary magazines. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I fixed my hair in front of the mirror in the hallway. Gray hair had almost completely replaced my once rich chestnut color, but I still tried to look neat. Pride was a trait that Archie always attributed to me, and perhaps he was right. Standing on the doorstep were Edmund, tall like his father, but with my features, and Vivian, a slender blonde with immaculate manicured nails and a designer handbag. "Mom!" Edmund hugged me, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne. "You look wonderful." "Don't fool an old lady," I said playfully, patting him on the shoulder and letting him into the house. "Vivian, dear, how are you?" My daughter-in-law gave me a reserved smile. "Everything's fine, Beatrice." "The kids say hi. You didn't bring them?" I couldn't hide my disappointment. "I baked a pie." "They have swimming lessons," Vivian cut in. We couldn't miss them, you understand. I understood only one thing. My grandchildren hadn't come again. In the last 6 months, I had seen them only twice, and both times at family celebrations, where I barely managed to exchange a few words with them. Archie is in his study, I said, leading them into the living room. I'll call him. When we were all gathered around the table, I noticed Edmund and Vivian exchanging glances, as if gathering their courage before an important conversation. Archie seemed to notice it too. He put down his fork and looked expectantly at his son. So, he said in his professorial tone, what brings you here this time? Edmund cleared his throat. Actually, we wanted to talk to you about something important, he said, placing his hand on Vivian's. After lunch? Over tea? Lunch was tense. Edmund tried to lighten the mood with stories about his work, and Vivian chimed in with comments about the twins' school. But I felt that this was just a prelude to something more serious. After lunch, we moved to the living room. I poured tea into the cups I had inherited from my grandmother. Thin, hand-painted porcelain. Archibald settled into his favorite armchair, while Edmund and Vivian sat down on the sofa next to him. Mom, Dad? Edmund began after taking his first sip of tea. We've been thinking for a long time about how best to approach this conversation. Just say what's on your mind, son. Archie always preferred directness. Edmund took a deep breath. Vivian and I want to buy a new house. The one we've found is in a good neighborhood, close to the best school in town. It would be perfect for the twins, I smiled. That's wonderful, dear. Have you found something within your budget? Vivian leaned forward. You see, Beatrice, the house is really beautiful, but it's a little out of our price range. The bank requires a substantial down payment to approve the mortgage. And you need help? Archie guessed, his eyebrows knitting together. Not exactly help. Edmund put down his cup. More like an investment in your grandchildren's future. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. What do you mean, Edmund? My son exchanged a quick glance with his wife, and she nodded slightly. Mom, Dad. His voice became businesslike, almost detached. We've been thinking, you're both over 65. This house is too big for the two of you. 4 bedrooms, a huge garden that needs tending. It must be exhausting. We're managing, I replied dryly, feeling the muscles in my back tense. Of course you're managing now, Vivian interjected in her melodious voice. But what about in a year? In 5 years? You need to think about the future. Archibald put down the newspaper he had mechanically picked up from the table. What are you getting at, Edmund? My son sat up straight. We suggest you sell this house. It's worth a lot of money, especially considering its location in the land. You could buy something smaller, more comfortable. And the difference. He paused. The difference could be used as a down payment on a new house. Silence hung in the room. I looked at my son, trying to figure out if he was serious. Archie and I had lived in this house for 32 years. Every corner of it was filled with memories. Edmund, I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. Your father and I have no plans to sell the house. It's our home, our... But why do you need it? Vivian interrupted, her voice ringing with irritation. The two of you in such a huge space. It's illogical, and the children could go to the best school in town. We could just give you the money for the down payment, Archie suggested, if you need help that badly. Edmund shook his head. Your savings won't be enough, Dad. We've already calculated everything. We need exactly the amount you'll get from selling this house and buying something smaller. I felt a chill spread through me. They had calculated everything, our savings, the value of the house, the possible difference, without our knowledge, without our involvement. No, I said firmly. We're not selling the house. Vivian's face contorted, but she quickly regained her composure. Beatrice, be reasonable. You're old now. Why do you need such a big house? Sell it and help your only son, Vivian. Archibald snapped at her. Watch your language when talking to my wife. Edmund raised his hand, calling for calm. Let's all calm down. Mom, think about it. It's an investment in your grandchildren's future. Don't you want them to have the best? I want them to have a grandmother with self-respect, I retorted. One who won't let even her own son walk all over her. Beatrice! Edmund's voice hardened. You don't understand. Vivian and I have almost agreed on the purchase. The bank is waiting for confirmation of the down payment. If we miss out on this house, we won't get another chance. That's your problem. Archie snapped. You shouldn't have counted on our money and planned to sell our house. Edmund stood up, his face reddening. Ah, great! Just wonderful! So your old walls are more important to you than your grandchildren's future? Don't twist my words, I said, standing up too. You and Vivian earn a good living. If you can't afford a house in the neighborhood you want, look for something else. We want this house, Vivian interjected. It's in the perfect location, close to the Pembertons' family. Oh, I see, Archie snorted. So it's about prestige, not the school for the children. Vivian shot him an angry look, but said nothing. Edmund came over to me and took my hands. Mom, please. Think about it. We can find you a nice little apartment. We'll take care of everything. I pulled my hands away. No, Edmund. This house isn't just walls. It's 32 years of my life with your father. We raised you here. Come on, Mom. He backed away. It's just a house. Bricks and wood. We're talking about real people, your grandchildren. Don't you dare blackmail me with my grandchildren. My voice trembled. Edmund exchanged glances with Vivian. Something in his eyes changed, a cold determination I hadn't seen before. All right, he said slowly, as if weighing each word. Then I'll be blunt. Either you sell the house and give us the money for the down payment, or you can forget about seeing Oliver and Amelia. What? I couldn't believe my ears. You heard me! His voice was icy. No more visits. No more holidays together. No Skype calls. Nothing. Archibald jumped to his feet. Are you threatening your own parents? Forbidding us to see our grandchildren? Vivian got up from the sofa and stood next to her husband. It's not a threat, Archibald. It's just a choice. Your choice. What is more important to you, the old house or your relationship with your only grandchildren? I felt nausea rising in my throat. My own son, my Edmund, whom Archie and I had raised with so much love, stood in front of me and calmly said that he would deprive me of seeing my grandchildren if I didn't give him the money. Get out, Archibald said quietly. Get out of our house. Now, Dad, Edmund began. Get out! Archie barked with such force that I flinched. And don't you dare come back until you've come to your senses and apologized to your mother. Edmund looked at his father for a second, then shrugged. Think about our offer. You have a week. He took Vivian by the hand, and they headed for the exit. At the door, he turned around. You're old now, Mom. Why do you need a house like this? Sell it and give us the money. Otherwise, you won't see your grandchildren again. The door closed behind them, and I sank down onto the sofa, feeling tears running down my cheeks. Archibald sat down next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. "Bea," he whispered, "what happened to our boy?" I shook my head, unable to answer. One question kept running through my mind. How could we have raised a son capable of doing this to his own parents? After Edmund and Vivian left, an oppressive silence fell over the house. I sat in the living room, staring at the half-finished tea in my grandmother's cups and the remains of the apple pie. Archibald silently cleared the table, his movements sharp, betraying his restrained anger. "Leave it," I said quietly. "I'll take care of it later." My husband sank into the armchair opposite me, rubbing his nose, a gesture that, after 40 years of marriage, I had learned to recognize as a sign of deep anxiety. "B," he began, choosing his words carefully. "You understand that we can't give in, don't you? This is, this is pure blackmail." I nodded, unable to speak. Edmund's face was before my eyes, cold, calculating, alien. When had our boy become this man? Closing my eyes, I was transported back to the past. Edmund, a 5-year-old toddler with unruly chestnut curls, sits on the kitchen floor and assembles a construction set. His little fingers clumsily connect the pieces, his face showing absolute concentration. "Mommy, look!" he says, lifting up his creation. "This is our house." "You're here, Daddy's here, and I'm here." I remember how my heart melted at those words, at the clumsy tower that in his imagination was our family nest. Edmund is 9. His first school project is a report on dinosaurs. Archie and I helped him cut pictures out of the encyclopedia and glue them onto a poster. He was so proud of his work, rehearsing his presentation in front of us dozens of times. "Mom, do you think I'll get an A?" he asked nervously. "Of course you will," I assured him. "You worked so hard." And he did get the highest grade. He came home happy, waving his poster, and showed me his grade first, not his friends. When did everything change? Gradually, almost imperceptibly, year after year. Perhaps the first signs appeared in adolescence. Edmund is 14, and for the first time he rolls his eyes in response to my words. It's a small gesture, but one that is so painful to a mother's heart. "Mom, you don't understand," has become his favorite phrase. "Things are different now. Maybe it's that private school we transferred him to?" Archie insisted, saying it was the best education in the area, that it was an investment in our son's future. I agreed, although I was worried that Edmund would be among children from wealthier families. Soon he began to feel ashamed of our situation. "Archie is just a literature professor, and I'm a librarian. We're not lawyers, doctors, or business people like the parents of his new friends." Edmund stopped inviting his classmates home. When I asked him why, he mumbled something about the house not being modern enough. And then Vivian came along. They met in their first year of law school. She was a snobby girl from a family with a big name, but an empty wallet. I remember their first visit together, how Vivian looked around our house, not hiding her condescending smile, how she commented on the old-fashioned charm of our living room, clearly implying that it was all long overdue for the trash. "She's just nervous," Edmund excused her. "She likes you, really." I nodded, even though I could already sense the insincerity in his words. Perhaps he was trying to convince himself that Vivian had taken a liking to us. The wedding was lavish, beyond our means. Vivian's parents insisted that the ceremony reflect the status of the family. Archie and I spent a significant portion of our savings so as not to lose face. Edmund was happy, and we just wanted him to be happy. After the wedding, visits became rare. At first, both were busy with their studies, then with their careers. When the twins were born, we thought we would see each other more often, but the opposite happened. Vivian established a strict regime for the children, and our meetings became even more rare and formal. "I don't want you to spoil them," she said. "We have our own parenting methods." That was the first time Archie got really angry. "They're our grandchildren, damn it!" he exclaimed when they left. "We have a right to see them." I calmed him down, saying that young parents need time, that everything will work out. But it only got worse. Edmund canceled meetings at the last minute more and more often. And when we did see each other, he was distant, as if he were performing an unpleasant duty. And now this ultimatum: sell the house, give the money, or forget about the grandchildren. B. Archie's voice brought me back to the present. Are you listening to me? I blinked, pushing the memories away. Sorry, I was lost in thought. I'm saying we need to consult a lawyer, he repeated. What Edmund is doing is illegal. We have a right to see our grandchildren. What are we going to do? I asked wearily. Sue our own son? Archie ran his hand through his gray hair. His shoulders slumped. I don't know, B. I just don't know. We sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Outside the window, it was gradually getting dark, the summer day giving way to evening. I didn't turn on the light, finding strange comfort in the gathering twilight. Why did he turn out this way? I finally asked the question that had been tormenting me all evening. Where did we go wrong, Archie? My husband shook his head. I'm not sure it's us, B. People change. The influence of their surroundings, their own choices. Maybe we really did spoil him too much. Or, on the contrary, were we not strict enough? I remembered how Edmund, at 16, begged us for expensive sneakers, like everyone else at school has. We refused, saying it was a waste of money, but he insisted so strongly, talking so convincingly about how important it was not to stand out, that we gave in. A month later, he was asking for a new phone. Remember, I began, how he threw a tantrum about going to summer camp? He was 13 and said that all his friends were going to Europe, not some stupid camp for poor people. Archie nodded. And we sent him to that expensive camp on the lake. We saved on everything for 3 weeks to pay for the trip. And he didn't even say thank you, I finished. He just said that next year he wanted to go to a camp with a tennis court. We were silent, lost in our memories. Each incident seemed insignificant on its own, but together they painted a frightening picture. Our son grew up believing that the world should cater to his desires. But there were good moments, too, I said, clinging to the bright memories. Remember how he took care of you when you broke your leg? He was 12, and he read to you every day after school. Archie smiled. Yes, he was a thoughtful boy. And remember how he gave you that brooch for your birthday? He saved his pocket money for 3 months. I automatically touched my neck, even though the brooch had long been in a box. A small silver bird with a tiny stone for an eye. Inexpensive, but so dear to my heart. What happened to him, Archie? Where did that boy go? My husband sighed. I don't know, B. Maybe he's still there, somewhere deep inside. He just got lost. We talked late into the night, going over the options. We could have compromised and given Edmund money from our savings, but it wasn't enough for the down payment he had mentioned. We could have ignored the ultimatum and tried to contact our grandchildren through their school or nanny, but that seemed like a last resort that would only exacerbate the conflict. What if we actually sell the house? Archie suggested unexpectedly. Not to give the money to Edmund, but just to start a new chapter. You yourself said that the house has become too big for the two of us. I looked at him in surprise. You love this house. Your office, the garden. I do, he agreed. But I love you more. And I can see how much this situation with Edmund and the grandchildren is hurting you. I shook my head. If we sell the house now, after his ultimatum, it will look like we're giving in. He'll decide he can continue to manipulate us. You're right, Archie sighed. But living in constant conflict with my only son, that's not what I wanted for our old age. When we finally went to bed, it was well past midnight, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Archibald's steady breathing and thinking about Edmund. About the little boy who once looked at me with adoration, About the teenager who was embarrassed by his uncool parents, about the young man who found less and less time to visit, and about the man who gave me an ultimatum today. I thought about Vivian, about her influence on our son. I remembered how his behavior changed after they met, how he began to speak differently, dress differently, even laugh differently, how he gradually adopted her condescending attitude toward us. But was it only Vivian's fault? Or had the seeds of selfishness been sown earlier by our concessions, our desire to give him the best of everything, our inability to say no? I turned on my side, looking at my sleeping husband. Archibald had always been stronger than me, more principled. How many conflicts with Edmund could have been avoided if I hadn't persuaded my husband to give in, if I hadn't insisted that he's just a child, he's just going through a difficult age, all his friends do it. Suddenly, I realized I was crying. Silent tears streamed down my cheeks, soaking into the pillow. I wasn't mourning the threat of losing my home, or even my grandchildren. I was mourning the loss of a son whom I thought I knew and loved, but who had become a stranger. The thought came unexpectedly, like a flash in the darkness of night. What if I really sold the house, not to give in to Edmund's blackmail, but to teach him a lesson? The idea was bold, perhaps even crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more feasible it seemed. I hardly ever see my grandchildren anyway. The house, no matter how dear it is to my heart, is still just walls. But the opportunity to show my son that his behavior is unacceptable, that manipulation and blackmail won't work. I sat up in bed, suddenly excited. A plan began to form in my head, the details falling into place. Edmund expects us to either give in and lose contact with our grandchildren, or submit and give him the money. But what if we do something else? What if we play our own game? I quietly got out of bed, trying not to wake Archie, and went to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, sat down at the table, took out a notebook and pen, and began to write down my thoughts. The plan was risky and required careful preparation. It would require help, legal, perhaps even financial. But the result could be a lesson Edmund would never forget. By dawn, I had filled several pages. The plan was taking shape. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, I heard Archibald's footsteps. "Bee?" He entered the kitchen, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Have you been awake?" I looked up from my notebook, feeling strangely calm and determined. "Archie," I said, "I have an idea." "You won't like it, but hear me out." He sat down opposite me, looking at the written pages. "I'm listening." "We're going to sell the house," I began, raising my hand to stop his objections. "But not the way Edmund wants." "And the money? The money won't go where he expects it to go." I outlined my plan. With each word, Archibald's eyebrows rose higher and higher. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, thinking about what he had heard. "It's risky," he finally said, "and quite cruel." "Sometimes cruelty is the only way to get through to someone," I replied. "Edmund needs to understand that his behavior has consequences." Archie shook his head, but I saw doubt in his eyes, not denial. "Are you sure you want to do this? It could destroy our relationship with our son for good." I took a deep breath. "Isn't it already destroyed? He's blackmailing us, Archie, threatening to take away our grandchildren if we don't give him money. What kind of relationship is that?" My husband rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We'll need help. A lawyer, at the very least." "I've already thought about that." I nodded. "Do you remember Olivia Harrogate? Your colleague's daughter? She's a successful family lawyer now. And you think she'll agree to participate in something like this?" I smiled, feeling something like confidence for the first time in the last 24 hours. "I think she'll be thrilled. Olivia has always loved unconventional solutions. Archibald looked at me for a long time, then slowly nodded. Okay, B. Let's try your plan. But promise me one thing. If at any point you change your mind, we'll stop immediately. I promise. I reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you for supporting me. 40 years together. He smiled weakly. When did I ever stop supporting you? We finished our tea, watching the rising sun paint the kitchen in warm tones. Ahead lay a difficult path, risky decisions, and possibly painful consequences. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't a helpless victim of circumstance, but someone in control of the situation. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. Olivia? This is Beatrice Fairmont. We need your help. Can you meet with us today? The next morning, I called Edmund. The conversation was brief, but I remember every word, every sigh on the other end of the line. Mom! There was surprise in his voice. He clearly hadn't expected the call so soon. Hello, Edmund. I tried to speak evenly, though inside I was trembling. Your father and I discussed your proposal. There was a pause. I could almost see him sitting up straight in his chair, preparing for a business conversation. And what decision did you come to? He asked briskly. We agreed to sell the house. The words came out with difficulty, but I continued. You're right, it's too big for the two of us. It's time to move on. There was a noisy exhalation on the other end of the line. It's the right decision, Mom. His voice sounded triumphant, which he tried to hide. You won't regret it. I'll help you find a nice apartment, and… That's not necessary, I interrupted. We can handle it ourselves. Just let me know when you need the money for the down payment. The sooner, the better, he replied quickly. The bank is giving us 3 months to arrange a mortgage. We'll try to make it work, I said. But you understand that selling a house is not a quick process. Haha, of course, Mom. His tone softened, almost caring. Take your time. The main thing is that you made the right decision. Vivian will be happy to hear it. I'm sure she will, I remarked dryly. We'll contact the realtor this week. Keep us posted on your dealings with the bank. After the conversation, I sat with the phone in my hands for a long time. Archibald, who had been watching me silently, came over and put his hand on my shoulder. Did he believe you? My husband asked. Completely. I looked at him. He didn't even ask a single question about where the money would go. He just took it for granted that he would get it. Archie shook his head. I thought so. What's next? A meeting with Olivia at 11, I said, standing up. We need to get ready. Olivia Harrogate's office was located in a modern building in Fresno's business district. Glass walls, minimalist decor, calm colors. Everything spoke of a successful practice. Olivia herself, a tall woman in her 40s with a confident posture and a penetrating gaze, met us in the conference room. Mrs. Fairmont, Professor, she shook our hands. I'm glad to see you, although the circumstances are not the most pleasant. I briefly outlined the situation on the phone, but now we had to discuss the details. So, Olivia opened her laptop. Your son is threatening to cut you off from your grandchildren if you don't sell the house and give him the money. That's right. Archibald nodded. This is definitely a form of emotional blackmail, she noted. You could file a lawsuit for the right to see your grandchildren, but to be honest, these cases often drag on and don't always go in favor of grandparents, especially if there are no proven cases of neglect on the part of the parents. We understand, I said, but we have another plan. I explained my thoughts. Olivia listened attentively, sometimes taking notes, sometimes asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen thoughtfully on the table. This is An unconventional approach, she finally said. Legally, it's fine if done correctly, but the emotional consequences could be serious. We're prepared for that, Archie said firmly. Edmund needs to understand that his behavior is unacceptable. Olivia nodded. Okay, in that case, let's discuss the details. We spent the next 2 hours developing a plan of action. Olivia explained the legal aspects, told me about the necessary documents, and suggested a few adjustments to my initial idea. By the end of the meeting, we had a clear step-by-step plan. You'll need a good real estate agent, Olivia said, closing her laptop. I can recommend Jonathan Mayfield. He's discreet and efficient. Thank you. I wrote down the name. There's one more question. A delicate one. Olivia smiled understandingly. About the grandchildren? Yes, I swallowed. If Edmund really forbids us to see them, I've already thought about that, she said, taking another document out of the folder. There are several approaches. First, you can maintain contact through the school, attend open events, concerts, sports competitions. Edmund is unlikely to be able to forbid you from being in public places. Archie nodded. That's a good idea. Second, Olivia continued, you can establish a relationship with the nanny or teachers. They often sympathize with grandparents in such situations. What if it does go to court? Archibald asked. Then we'll fight, Olivia replied confidently. You have no history of conflict with your son, no alcohol or mental health issues, and you are financially stable. All of this works in your favor. But let's hope it doesn't go to court. We left Olivia's office with a feeling that is difficult to describe. A mixture of determination, fear, and a strange, almost excited anticipation. The plan was risky, but feasible. And most importantly, it was our plan, our decision, not one imposed by Edmund. The next few days were spent preparing. We met with the recommended realtor, Jonathan, who valued our house even higher than we had expected. The market is booming right now, he explained, especially for houses with character in good neighborhoods. And your house is simply beautiful. I looked at him with gratitude. It was nice to hear that someone appreciated our house for more than just square footage and monetary value. How quickly do you think we can sell? Archie asked. With the right price and good presentation, a month, 2 at most, Jonathan replied confidently. I suggest starting with a professional photo shoot and a virtual tour. That will attract more potential buyers, and so began the process of selling our house. A photographer, a cleaning company, rearranging furniture for better presentation of the rooms. We plunged into a whirlwind of activity that helped us not to think about the painful reality of what was happening. Edmund called almost every day to inquire about our progress. His enthusiasm was almost childlike, and I thought bitterly about how happy he could have been if he had simply offered to help us move instead of blackmailing us for money. How's the house going? He would ask. Any interested buyers yet? Everything is going according to plan, I replied cautiously. Jonathan says there's a lot of interest. Great, Mom! He sounded so pleased. I've already discussed the details with the bank. As soon as the money is in hand, we can close the deal. I didn't remind him that we hadn't yet discussed how much we would give him. He seemed to assume that he would get the lion's share. In parallel with the sale of the house, Archie and I, following the plan, began looking for a new home. But not a small apartment, as Edmund had expected, but a cozy 2-story cottage in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Fresno. The house was smaller than our current one, but still spacious, with a small garden and a porch. Are you sure you want this one? Archie asked as we looked at the cottage for the second time. It's expensive. I'm sure, I nodded. It has everything we need. Your office, my kitchen, a guest room for? I faltered. For the grandchildren, if they ever come. Archie put his arm around my shoulders. They will come, Bee. Sooner or later, I rested my head on his shoulder, grateful for his optimism. Archibald always believed in the best, even when I had my doubts. One evening, about 3 weeks after we put the house on the market, Jonathan called with good news. "We have an offer," he announced, "and a very generous one. The Thorntons have been looking for a house like this for over a year." "How much?" Archie asked, putting the phone on speaker. Jonathan named a figure that took my breath away. It was even more than we had hoped for. "They want to close quickly," the realtor continued. "They're ready to put down a deposit next week." "What do you say?" Archie and I exchanged glances. According to our plan, a quick sale was the ideal option. "We agree," I replied. "When can we meet to sign the papers?" "Would tomorrow at 10 suit you?" "More than happy to." After talking to Jonathan, I immediately called Olivia to share the news and clarify the next steps in our plan. "Great," she said. "I'll have all the necessary documents ready by tomorrow. After signing the purchase agreement, we'll immediately start setting up an educational trust for your grandchildren." "What about the charitable foundation?" I asked. "I'm already working on that. I've selected several organizations that meet your criteria. We'll discuss the details tomorrow." The next call was to Edmund. I decided to tell him about the sale myself, rather than wait for him to call with another question about the progress. "Mom?" He sounded surprised, as he always did when I called him first. "Edmund, I have good news," I said, trying to make my voice sound natural. "We're selling the house. The buyers offered a great price and want to close the deal quickly." That's fantastic," he exclaimed. "When is the signing? When will the money be in our hands?" Not a word about how my father and I feel about selling the house where we've lived for over 30 years. Only about the money. "And everything should be finalized within 2 weeks," I replied. "Jonathan says the deal is safe. The buyers are verified." "Great, Mom, just great." I could almost see him rubbing his hands together. "You're doing great. Have you and Dad found an apartment yet?" "We're working on it," I replied evasively. "Maybe I can help. I have a real estate agent friend who specializes in housing for," he hesitated, "for older people." "Thanks, but we'll manage," I cut him off. "We have our own realtor." "As you say," he didn't insist. "Listen, maybe you and Dad could come over for dinner this weekend? The kids miss you." I almost laughed at this sudden concern. The children who supposedly missed us hadn't seen us in almost 3 months. "We'd love to," I agreed, deciding to play along. "Saturday?" "Great. Vivian will cook something special." After talking to my son, I felt a strange emptiness. The plan was going smoothly, but there was no joy. Only the bitterness of realizing that my son saw us as nothing more than a source of money. "Bee?" Archie entered the room. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," I forced a smile. "Edmund invited us to dinner on Saturday. He says the kids miss us." Archie snorted. "How convenient." "They didn't miss us for 3 months, but now they suddenly do." "Exactly," I sighed. "But we'll go. We need to keep up the appearance that everything is going according to his plan." Dinner at Edmund and Vivian's was a real ordeal. They both radiated false cordiality, asked about our future home, and promised to help with the move. Vivian even offered to take some of our old things as a memento. "This chest of drawers would look great in our hall," she remarked casually. "It's unlikely to fit in your small apartment." I smiled and nodded, hiding my true feelings. The twins, Oliver and Amelia, were the only bright spot of the evening. They showed us their drawings, told us about school, and hugged us so sincerely that my heart ached. I looked at them, memorizing every line of their faces, every gesture, not knowing when I would see them again after our plan was revealed. Grandma, are you going to live far away? Oliver asked, climbing onto my lap. Not very far, sweetie. I stroked his head. Still in Fresno. Will we come visit you? I glanced quickly at Edmund, who was pretending to be engrossed in conversation with Archie. Of course you will, I said, hoping I wasn't lying. Whenever you want. The next few days were spent in a whirlwind of legal formalities and preparations for the move. Archie and I began packing, deciding what to take with us to our new home, what to give away, and what to throw away. Every box, every item brought back memories. Do you remember this vase? Archie asked, holding a blue ceramic vase in his hands. You broke one just like it on the day we moved in. I bought this one to replace it. Of course I remember, I smiled. You brought it home looking so solemn, as if it were a diamond. It was to me. He kissed me on the temple. Your smile at that moment was worth all the diamonds in the world. There were many moments like that. As we sorted through our belongings, it was as if we were reliving our life in this house. Edmund's toys, which I couldn't bring myself to throw away when he grew up. Photo albums with faded pictures. Archie's vinyl record collection. My cookbooks with notes in the margins. We can put this off, Archie suggested one evening, seeing me sitting on the floor surrounded by old photos. Hire someone to pack. I shook my head. No, I want to do it myself. Say goodbye to everything, every memory. He sat down next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. Do you regret our decision? I thought about it. No, I finally replied. I'm sad, but I don't regret it. This house is just a place. People and relationships are what matter. And our relationship with Edmund, it has to change. Otherwise, we'll just lose him forever. Archie nodded. I think so too, but it still hurts. It hurts, I agreed, but it's necessary. The day of signing all the documents came sooner than we expected. First, the official closing of the sale of the house, then the signing of the documents for the purchase of the cottage we had chosen, and finally, the most important part, meeting with Olivia to set up an educational trust for the grandchildren and a donation to a charitable foundation. Everything is ready, Olivia said, handing us folders with documents. An educational trust in the names of Oliver and Amelia Fairmont. The money will only be available to pay for education, starting with college. Neither Edmund nor Vivian will be able to access it or change the terms without your consent. Excellent, I said, looking through the documents. And the charity? Here, she said, handing me another folder. The Golden Age Foundation for the Elderly. They work to improve the living conditions of single pensioners, organize social programs, and provide legal assistance. The donation will be made in your name, with the option of annual contributions if you decide to continue your support. I glanced at Archie, and he nodded. That's a good choice, he said. Symbolic. Exactly, I agreed and signed the documents. When do you plan to tell Edmund? Olivia asked, putting away the signed papers. After we move, Archie replied. We'll invite him and Vivian to the housewarming party. I think it will be an interesting conversation. Olivia smiled knowingly. Good luck. And remember, whatever happens, everything is legally sound. Edmund won't be able to contest any of these documents. We thanked her and left the office with a feeling that was difficult to describe. A mixture of relief, anxiety, and a strange, almost painful anticipation. The move was scheduled for the following week. Edmund called almost every day to ask how things were going and if we needed any help. I responded evasively, without going into details. Everything is under control, I said. Don't worry. But where are you moving to? He insisted. I don't even know the address of your new place. You'll find out in due course, I replied. We haven't made a final decision yet. It was a lie, but a necessary one. The cottage had already been purchased, and the move had been planned down to the last detail. We didn't want Edmund to find out about our new home ahead of time. That would ruin the element of surprise, which was an important part of our plan. The last day in the old house was particularly difficult. Archie and I went through every room, saying goodbye. Our footsteps echoed in the empty rooms, stripped of furniture and personal belongings. 32 years, I whispered, standing in the middle of the living room. We lived here for 32 years. And they were wonderful. Archie hugged me. But there are many more good years ahead, Bea. In a new house, with new memories, I pressed myself against him, fighting back tears. Do you think we're doing the right thing? I think we're doing what we have to do, he replied after a pause. The right decision isn't always the easiest or most pleasant one. I nodded, knowing he was right. We weren't doing this out of revenge or a desire to punish Edmund, but out of a need to show him the consequences of his actions. Sometimes a lesson has to be harsh in order to be learned. On moving day, a team of movers arrived. They quickly and carefully loaded our belongings into the van. I stood on the porch, watching as our life, packed into boxes, disappeared into the depths of the truck. Ready? Archie asked when the last box was loaded. I looked back at the house one last time. The sun played on the windows, as if winking goodbye. How many sunrises had we seen within these walls? How many sunsets had we watched while sitting on the porch with a cup of tea? Ready? I took my husband's hand, and we walked to the car. The new house greeted us with silence and the smell of fresh paint. It was smaller than the old one, but cozy, bright, with large windows and a spacious kitchen. Archie and I went from room to room, planning the furniture layout, discussing where to hang the photos and where to put the bookcases. Your office will be here, I said, pointing to a small room with windows overlooking the garden. The lighting is excellent in the morning. And the nursery? Archie asked, opening the door to a small, bright room. The guest room, I corrected him. But yes, if the grandchildren ever come to visit. He hugged me. They will be. They definitely will, in the evening, when the main things had been unpacked and put away. We sat on the new porch, drank tea, and looked at the stars. Shall we call Edmund tomorrow? Archie asked. I nodded. Tomorrow. We'll invite him to the housewarming on Saturday. He'll be furious, my husband remarked. He will, I agreed, but maybe it will make him think. I looked up at the sky, where bright dots of stars formed intricate patterns. Tomorrow, a new chapter in our lives would begin. A chapter that could lead to reconciliation or a final break with our son. But whatever the outcome, I knew one thing. Archie and I had done everything possible to preserve our dignity and teach Edmund an important life lesson. The game had begun, and the end was near. Saturday morning was unusually sunny and warm, as if nature itself was blessing our housewarming. I woke up early and immediately started preparing. Today was going to be a difficult conversation, and I wanted at least the setting to be as comfortable as possible. Archibald helped me in the kitchen, cutting vegetables for the salad while I prepared the meat for roasting. We worked in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Are you nervous? He finally asked, arranging tomatoes on a cutting board. It would be strange not to be nervous, I replied, trying to smile. But I'm sure we're doing the right thing. Archie nodded and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Bea. You know, in 40 years of marriage, I've always thought of you as a strong woman. But now I see how strong you really are. His words touched me deeply. I leaned close to my husband, grateful for his support. Whatever happened today, I had Archie, and that meant everything would be all right. After breakfast, we made the final preparations. I set the table in the living room using our best china, my grandmother's set, which we had brought from our old house. Archie arranged the chairs and checked that the wine was sufficiently chilled. Everything had to look like a normal family celebration, even though we both knew it would be anything but a normal dinner. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and went to open it. Edmund and Vivian were standing on the doorstep, both dressed as if they were going to a business meeting rather than a family dinner. Edmund was in a formal suit, Vivian in an elegant dress with a string of pearls around her neck. "Mom!" Edmund hugged me with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Congratulations on your new home!" "Thank you, dear." I stepped back, letting them in. "Come in, make yourselves at home." Vivian looked around with poorly concealed surprise. Her gaze swept over the spacious hallway, the furniture, the paintings on the walls. "What an unexpected choice, Beatrice," she said with a forced smile. "We thought you would choose something more compact." "This house is perfect for our needs," I replied calmly. "Archie has a study for his work, and I have a spacious kitchen. And a garden, of course. I couldn't imagine life without a garden." Edmund walked into the living room, where Archibald met him. "Father," he said, shaking Archie's hand, "you've settled in nicely." "Yes, we like it," my husband nodded. "Whiskey?" "With pleasure." While Archie was pouring drinks, I noticed Edmund casting appraising glances around the room. His face expressed a mixture of surprise and concern. He clearly hadn't expected us to choose this kind of house. "Where are the children?" I asked, arranging the snacks on the table. "With the nanny," Vivian replied quickly. "Amelia has a slight cold, so we decided not to take any chances." I stifled a sigh of disappointment. So Edmund didn't want the children present when we discussed money. It was predictable, but still sad. "That's a shame," I said. "I made cookies for them." "Next time," Edmund waved it off and took a sip of whiskey. "So, how did the move go? Did you get all the paperwork sorted out?" "Yes, everything's fine," Archie replied. "Jonathan turned out to be a very efficient realtor." "Great." Edmund put down his glass and got down to business. "So, the money's already in the account?" I exchanged glances with Archie. The moment of truth had come sooner than we had planned, but perhaps that was for the best. Why delay the inevitable? "Yes, all the proceeds from the sale of the house have been received," I confirmed. "But Edmund, before we continue, let's have lunch." "I've cooked so much." "Of course, Mom." He made a visible effort to hide his impatience. As you say, lunch was tense. Edmund and Vivian made small talk, asking about the neighbors and our plans for the house, but I could tell their minds were elsewhere. They had come for the money and were struggling to contain their impatience. Finally, when dessert was over, Edmund leaned back in his chair and looked directly at me. "So, Mom, I think it's time we discussed financial matters." He smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "The bank is waiting for confirmation of funds for the mortgage." I dabbed my lips with a napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it next to my plate. "Yes, it's time," I agreed. "Let's go to the living room. It's more comfortable to talk there." We moved to the cozy living room with large windows overlooking the garden. I sat down in an armchair, and Archibald stood behind me, putting his hand on my shoulder in a gesture of support. Edmund and Vivian settled on the sofa opposite. "As you know," I began, "we sold our house for a very good price." "Higher than we had originally expected." Edmund nodded eagerly. Yes, Jonathan mentioned it. That's wonderful. It means we'll have enough for the down payment and for renovations in the new house. I noticed Vivian nudging him gently with her elbow, apparently thinking his words were too blunt. Yeah, Edmund, I continued. Before we get into the details, I want to remind you how this conversation about selling the house started. You came to us with an ultimatum. You said, "You're old, why do you need a house like this? Sell it and give us the money, or you won't see your grandchildren again." Edmund's face reddened slightly. Mom, I was upset. You know that's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant, I said firmly. And those words made me think seriously. About you, about our family, about how we raised you. Edmund shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, clearly feeling uncomfortable. Let's not dwell on the past. The important thing is that we all agree now that selling the house was the right decision. Agreed, I nodded. But when it comes to what to do with the money, I'm afraid our opinions will differ. Vivian leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean, Beatrice? I looked her straight in the eye, not looking away. I mean that the money from the sale of the house has already been distributed, and not in the way you expected. What? Edmund sat up straight. What do you mean, distributed? Where? I took a deep breath, feeling Archie's fingers tighten on my shoulder. First, part of the money went toward the purchase of this house. I gestured around the living room. It cost us more than we planned, but I think it was worth it. But, Edmund began, but I raised my hand to stop him. Let me finish. Second, a significant amount has been invested in an educational fund for Oliver and Amelia. This money will only be available to pay for their education, starting with college. Neither you nor Vivian will be able to use it for any other purpose. Edmund's face turned crimson. You had no right to decide for us. They are our children, and we. And finally, I continued, ignoring his objections, the remaining amount has been donated to the Golden Age Charity Fund for the elderly. They do wonderful work helping those in their twilight years who have no family support. A deafening silence hung in the room. Edmund looked at me as if he couldn't believe his ears. Vivian turned pale, her fingers clenching her purse convulsively. You gave all the money to charity? Edmund finally managed to say. Instead of helping your own son? Not all of it, I corrected him. As I said, some went to the house, some to an educational fund for your children. That's also helping you, just not in the way you expected. Edmund jumped to his feet, his face contorted with anger. Do you realize what you've done? He shouted. We've almost closed the deal on the house. The bank is waiting for confirmation of the down payment. We could lose the deposit. That's your problem, Archibald replied calmly. You shouldn't have counted on money that doesn't belong to you. Vivian also stood up, her eyes flashing. You did this on purpose, didn't you? She hissed. This is revenge for Edmund daring to ask you for help? Ask? I smiled grimly. Blackmail is a more accurate word. Give me the money, or you'll never see your grandchildren again. That's not a request, Vivian. That's a threat. You've got it all wrong, Edmund exclaimed. I would never forbid you from seeing the children. Really? Archie raised an eyebrow. I thought you were very clear. Edmund ran his hand through his hair, clearly trying to pull himself together. Listen, we all got a little heated back then. Let's just forget about it and think about how to fix the situation. Maybe we can somehow reallocate the funds? Withdraw the donation? It's impossible, I said firmly. All the documents have been signed. The funds have been transferred. It's an irreversible process. You couldn't have done that! Edmund exploded again. You should have discussed it with me. I'm your son, damn it! Yes, you are my son. I looked him straight in the eye. And that's exactly why I couldn't let you continue to think that blackmail and manipulation are acceptable ways to communicate with your parents. Vivian sank back onto the sofa, her face a mixture of shock and rage. You know what? She said in an icy tone. I've always thought you, Beatrice, had too high an opinion of yourself. You're always criticizing our decisions, always thinking you know better. But this crosses the line. Ah? I've never criticized your decisions, Vivian, I replied. On the contrary, I've always tried to respect your autonomy as parents, even when you limited our contact with our grandchildren. That's not true, she exclaimed. We've always welcomed your involvement in the children's lives. Archibald snorted. 3 visits in the last year, Vivian. 3. And every time, under some pretext, the children weren't there, or we were given minimal time with them. The children have busy schedules, she snapped. Not everything revolves around you. Edmund, who had been pacing the room all this time, suddenly stopped in front of me. Give the money back, Mom, he demanded. Call that damn foundation and tell them you've changed your mind. They can't refuse, they can and they will, I replied calmly. The donation is legally binding. Olivia Harrogate is an excellent lawyer. Edmund turned pale. You hired a lawyer? Of course, Archie interjected. After your ultimatum, we decided that legal protection wouldn't hurt. Edmund sank down on the sofa next to Vivian, suddenly looking tired and aged. I can't believe this, he muttered. My own parents. Do you know that this house was our only chance to move to a good neighborhood? For the children, for their future. It's not about the neighborhood, I shook my head. It's about prestige. About Vivian's desire to live near the Pembertons so they would finally accept her as one of their own. Vivian sat up, her eyes flashing. Don't you dare talk about me like that. You don't know anything about my family. I know enough, I replied. I know that since your wedding, you've been trying to prove to your parents that you made the right choice in marrying Edmund. I know they don't think he's successful enough for their daughter. And I know that this house in a prestigious neighborhood was your way of gaining their approval. The room fell into a heavy silence. Edmund stared at the floor, Vivian clenched her fists, and Archie and I waited for their reaction. How could you? Edmund finally said, looking up. How could you do this to your only son? How could you blackmail your own parents? Archie retorted. How could you use our grandchildren as bargaining chips? That's not what I meant, Edmund exclaimed. I just wanted you to understand how important this is to us. No, Edmund. I shook my head. That's exactly what you meant. You wanted to force us to do what was good for you by using the most precious thing we have, our grandchildren. That's pure manipulation. Vivian stood up, adjusting her dress. Let's go, Edmund, she said coldly. There's nothing more for us to do here. Edmund didn't move. Do you even understand what I'm going to tell the bank now? He asked, looking at us. How am I going to explain why we suddenly don't have the money for the down payment? The truth, Archie suggested, that you were counting on money that wasn't yours, and you miscalculated. Edmund, let's go, Vivian said more insistently, tugging at his sleeve. He rose slowly, his face a mask of cold fury. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Both of you will regret it. Are you threatening us? Archie stepped forward. Again! I put my hand on my husband's shoulder to stop him. Edmund, I said calmly, I understand that you're angry right now. That's natural. But when your anger subsides, think about what happened, about how you treated us, about what you are teaching your children by your example. Don't you dare lecture me, he snapped. Not after what you did. We did what we thought was right, I replied. The money for your children's education is our contribution to their future. A real contribution, not buying a house in a prestigious neighborhood. What about charity? Vivian asked sarcastically. Is that a contribution to the future too? It's a lesson, Archie replied simply. A lesson for Edmund, for you, and hopefully someday for Oliver and Amelia. A lesson that money isn't the most important thing in life, and that respect for one's elders isn't just empty words. Edmund laughed bitterly. Wonderful! Just wonderful. You've taught me a lesson. Are you satisfied? And now what? Do you think we'll just forget everything and be a happy family? No! I shook my head. I think it will take time for the wounds to heal. But I hope that one day you will understand why we did what we did. Don't count on it, Vivian snorted, heading for the exit. And don't expect to see the children any time soon. Edmund followed her, but stopped at the door and turned around. You know what's ironic? He said with a bitter smile. You always taught me that family is the most important thing, that you have to make sacrifices for your family. And now, when I asked you for help, you chose to give the money to strangers rather than to me. We didn't refuse to help you, Edmund, I said quietly. We refused to be your ATMS. There's a difference. He shook his head and left, slamming the door so hard that the windows rattled. Archie and I stood in the middle of the living room, stunned and emotionally drained. The silence that followed Edmund and Vivian's departure seemed deafening. Well, that's it, Archie finally said, sinking into an armchair. We did it. I nodded, unable to speak. In theory, everything had gone according to plan. We had said what we wanted to say. We had made it clear to Edmund that his behavior was unacceptable. But why did it feel so heavy on my heart? Are you okay? Archie asked, looking at me with concern. No, I replied honestly, but I will be. I just need some time. He stood up and hugged me. We did the right thing, Bea. Edmund needed to learn that lesson. I know, I said, pressing myself against his chest, but the price was higher than I expected. The grandchildren? Yes, I whispered. Vivian wasn't joking. We really may not see them for a very long time. Archie sighed. Perhaps. But I believe Edmund will come to his senses. Maybe not right away, but eventually. I wanted to believe him, but doubts gnawed at my soul. In Edmund's eyes, I saw not only anger, but also deep hurt, almost betrayal. Would he ever be able to forgive us? And, more importantly, would he be able to learn from what had happened? I hope we weren't wrong, I said, pulling away and wiping away unwelcome tears. Even if we did, Archie replied, we did what we had to do. Sometimes in life there are no perfect solutions, only a choice between different kinds of wrong. I nodded, understanding the profound truth in his words. We made a choice based on our values and beliefs. Now all that remained was to live with the consequences of that choice. We spent the rest of the day cleaning up the traces of the failed celebration. I silently stacked the dishes while Archie took out the trash. Each of us was lost in our own thoughts, digesting what had happened. In the evening, sitting on the porch of our new home and watching the sunset, I couldn't help but think about the complex, tangled relationships between parents and children. Love mixed with disappointment. Hope undermined by reality. The desire for the best distorted by selfishness. What are you thinking about? Archie asked, sitting down next to me. Edmund, I replied honestly. How he's changed. And whether anything will change after today, Archie took my hand. Whatever happens, we'll get through it, Bea. Together, as always, I squeezed his hand, finding comfort in his presence. Whatever the future held, I had Archibald, my beacon in the stormy sea of life. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Archie and I looked at each other, wondering who it could be. Could Edmund be back? Archie went to answer the door, and I remained seated, feeling my heart pound. A minute later, he returned with an envelope in his hands. A courier, he explained, From Olivia. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short note and a photograph. The photo showed Oliver and Amelia at a school concert, both smiling at the camera, holding some kind of awards. I thought you would enjoy seeing your grandchildren, the note read. This is from the spring concert. I'm friends with their music teacher. If you'd like, I can arrange for you to be invited to the next event. Olivia. Tears welled up in my eyes. Such a simple gesture, but so meaningful. Olivia understood that we might lose contact with our grandchildren, so she prepared this little gift for us in advance. She thought of everything, I whispered, showing Archie the note. He smiled as he looked at the photo. Oliver looks so much like you, he remarked. The same eyes. I nodded, unable to speak. Suddenly, the prospect of not seeing our grandchildren became so real, so painful, that I could hardly breathe. We'll fight, Archie said firmly, as if reading my mind. If Edmund really forbids us to see them, we'll find a way. Through school, through friends, through the courts, if necessary. I rested my head on his shoulder, staring at the faces of my grandchildren in the photo. Yes, we will fight. Not out of stubbornness or pride, but out of love. Because despite everything that has happened, despite all the mistakes and hurt, love remains. Complicated, sometimes painful, but real. And maybe one day that love will help us all find our way back to each other. 6 months flew by unnoticed. Autumn gave way to winter, winter gave way to spring, and now the gardens of Fresno were once again ablaze with color. Our new home was gradually filling with life and memories, although some wounds were still fresh. I stood on the porch, watering the geraniums I had planted in pots 2 months ago. The flowers were a delight to the eye with their bright colors: rich scarlet, soft pink, lilac. Gardening had always been a hobby of mine, but in my new home, it had become a real passion. Perhaps it was because I was trying to fill the void left by my breakup with Edmund. B. Archibald peeked out the door, holding an envelope in his hands. You have a letter. I wiped my hands on my apron and took the envelope. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the address neatly written, with no return address. Inside was a postcard with a picture of the seaside and a short note. Grandma, we miss you. See you soon. Oliver and Amelia. My heart ached with tenderness and longing. We had seen our grandchildren only twice in the last 6 months, both times at school events, to which Olivia's music teacher, a friend of ours, had secretly invited us. Edmund probably didn't know about these meetings. We sat in the back row, watching Oliver play the piano and Amelia sing in the choir. After the concerts, they would run up to us, hug us, and quickly tell us about their lives, before Vivian noticed and took them away. From the children? Archie guessed, looking at my face. I silently handed him the card. He read it, and his eyes softened. That's a good sign, B. They remember us. Yes, but... See you soon? What does that mean? Edmund doesn't allow them to see us, and the school year is over. There won't be any more concerts. Archie shrugged. Maybe Edmund has softened his stance? Or maybe the children decided to write without his knowledge? I shook my head, not knowing what to think. Edmund hadn't been in touch since our last conversation. We tried calling him several times, but he didn't answer. Once, Vivian picked up the phone, but when she heard my voice, she hung up immediately. The children couldn't have sent the card themselves, I reasoned. They're only 8 years old. Someone must have helped them. Maybe the nanny, Archie suggested. Or Edmund himself? The thought that my son might be secretly encouraging the children to communicate with us was both encouraging and disturbing. I didn't want to get my hopes up only to be disappointed again. We'll see, I finally said, carefully tucking the card into my apron pocket. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Life in the new house was gradually finding its rhythm. Archie set up a study on the first floor, where he spent most of his time working on his memoirs about his teaching career. I tended the garden, experimented with new recipes, and signed up for painting classes at the local community center. We got to know our neighbors, mostly retirees like us, and even started a small book club that met every 2 weeks. It seemed like life was back on track, but the shadow of my conflict with Edmund cast a pall over even the brightest moments. I often found myself telling Archie something and thinking, I should tell Edmund this, and then remembering with sadness that we weren't on speaking terms. On one of those days, when my longing for my son and grandchildren was particularly acute, the phone rang. I picked up the receiver without looking at the caller ID. Hello? Mom? Edmund's voice sounded uncertain, almost timid. It's me. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly feeling like cotton wool. Edmund, I breathed. How are you? Fine, he paused. Listen, I wanted to ask. The children really want to visit you. Could we, maybe this weekend? I couldn't believe my ears. After 6 months of silence, Edmund was calling to arrange a meeting with his grandchildren? Of course, I replied hastily, afraid he would change his mind. Any time. We'd be delighted. Okay? He paused again. Then maybe Saturday? Around 2? Great. I'll bake an apple pie. Oliver loves it. Yes, he does. A hint of warmth flashed in his voice. See you Saturday, then. He hung up, and I sat there with the phone in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. When Archie came back from the store, I was still in a state of mild shock. B? What's wrong? Edmund called, I said. He's bringing the kids over on Saturday. Archie dropped the grocery bag. What? Edmund? Our Edmund? I nodded, still not quite believing it was real. He suggested it himself. He said the kids were asking to come see us. That's unexpected. Archie rubbed his chin. How did he sound? Uncertain, almost embarrassed, not like himself. We discussed at length the possible reasons for Edmund's sudden decision to resume our relationship. Maybe the children had really begged so insistently that he couldn't refuse, or had something happened that changed his view of the situation? In any case, we decided not to ask him directly, but simply to enjoy the opportunity to see our grandchildren. Saturday came both too quickly and agonizingly slowly. I got up at dawn to prepare everything. I baked not only an apple pie, but also chocolate chip cookies and the meat pies that Archie loved so much. The house sparkled with cleanliness, vases held fresh flowers from the garden, and the children's room, which we had set up on the second floor, was filled with new toys and books. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and went to open the door, feeling my heart pounding. Edmund stood on the doorstep, holding Oliver and Amelia by the hand. When the children saw me, they rushed to hug me with joyful cries. Grandma, we missed you so much. I missed you too, my darlings. I hugged them, feeling a lump in my throat. How you've grown! Edmund stood slightly apart, shifting from foot to foot. He looked tired and a little gaunt, as if he had been through hard times. Hi, Mom, he finally said. Can we come in? Of course. I stepped back, letting them into the house. Archie is in the living room. He'll be happy to see you. The children immediately ran to their grandfather, while Edmund and I remained in the hallway, not knowing how to start the conversation. Nice house, he finally said, looking around. Cozy. Thank you, I tried to smile. We like it. Listen, Mom. He took a deep breath, as if deciding on something. I want to apologize for how I behaved, for the ultimatum, for everything. It was wrong. I looked at him, not believing my ears. Edmund, my proud son, who never admitted his mistakes, was standing in front of me and apologizing. "What happened, Edmund?" I asked quietly. "Why now?" He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that always betrayed his nervousness. "A lot of things. Vivian and we had problems. Serious problems. After that conversation with you, she was furious. She blamed me for not being able to convince you to give up the money. We almost got divorced. I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "Don't be." He smiled weakly. "It was good for us." We went through family therapy. We reevaluated a lot of things, and I realized how terribly I behaved towards you and Dad. We went into the kitchen, where I poured us some tea. Edmund sat staring into his cup, as if gathering his thoughts. "You know, after our last conversation, I was furious," he continued. "I thought you had betrayed me. I told Vivian that I never wanted to see you again. But then Oliver asked why we didn't visit Grandma and Grandpa anymore. And I couldn't answer him. I couldn't say, because Grandma didn't give us money for the house. It sounded so petty. I listened silently, giving him a chance to speak. And then, at work, I encountered a similar situation." He smiled grimly. "One of the clients was blackmailing his father, threatening to forbid him from seeing his grandchildren if he didn't sign over his business to him. And I looked at this man and thought, what a terrible son. And then I realized that I had done the same thing." He looked up, and I saw sincere remorse in his eyes. "I'm ashamed, Mom. Really ashamed. I don't know if you and Dad will ever be able to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I realize how wrong I was." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "We already forgave you, Edmund. The moment you called and said you were bringing the children." Tears glistened in his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't deserve parents like you." "You do," I said firmly. "You are our son, and we love you no matter what." The sound of the children and Archie laughing came from the living room. Edmund turned at the sound and smiled. "They missed you," he said. "They kept asking when we were going to visit Grandma and Grandpa. They even sent you a secret postcard." "I got it," I nodded. "It was very touching. They insisted on it. They made the nanny take them to the post office." He shook his head. "Stubborn, just like their grandmother." I laughed, feeling the tension between us gradually dissipate. "What about the house?" I asked cautiously. "The one in the prestigious neighborhood?" Edmund waved his hand. "Forget it. It was Vivian's idea, or rather, her parents'. They always thought we weren't living up to our status. But after everything that happened, I realized that I didn't want to get into huge debt for the sake of a prestigious address. We stayed in our apartment and renovated it. It turned out that we had enough space." "Did Vivian agree?" "Not right away," he admitted. "But, as I said, we rethought a lot of things. She changed too. She thinks less about what her parents will say, and more about what is really important for us and the children." We joined Archie and the grandchildren in the living room. Oliver was enthusiastically telling his grandfather about his chess successes, while Amelia was leafing through a picture book that Archie had taken out of his collection for her. "Grandma!" Amelia exclaimed when she saw me. "Grandpa says you have a real garden. Can I see it?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, holding out my hand to her. "Come on, I'll show you my roses." The whole day passed in an atmosphere of cautious but sincere reunion. We drank tea with cake, played board games, and Archie read aloud to the children. Edmund was a little aloof at first, but gradually warmed up, joining in the conversations and even joking with his father, just like in the good old days. When it was time for dinner, I set the table in the dining room. Nothing fancy: roast chicken, vegetables, mashed potatoes. but everything was prepared with love. We sat around the table like a real family, although I could feel a slight tension in the air. Too much had been said and done for everything to go back to normal in a single day. Grandma, will you teach me how to bake a pie like this? Amelia asked, eating her dessert with gusto. Of course, dear, I smiled. Next time, we'll bake it together. So there will be a next time? Oliver asked hopefully, looking from me to his father. Edmund caught my eye and nodded. Of course there will be. If Grandma and Grandpa don't mind, we could come every other Saturday. We're all for it, Archie replied, and I saw his eyes sparkle. He was also struggling to contain his emotions. After dinner, the children helped me clear the table, and Edmund and Archie went out onto the porch. Through the window, I could see them standing side by side, watching the sunset and talking quietly about something. Father and son, trying to rebuild a broken relationship. When it was time to say goodbye, the children didn't want to leave. They hugged us, promised to come back soon, and asked us to call them in the evening before bedtime. We'll be back in 2 weeks, Edmund promised as he led them to the car. And thank you for today. Thank you, I replied, standing on the porch next to Archie. For bringing the children. For deciding to take the first step, he nodded, clearly embarrassed by my words, and got into the car. Archie and I waved until the car disappeared around the bend. Well, Archie said, putting his arm around my shoulders. It looks like the ice is broken. Yes, I said, leaning against him. But this is only the beginning. There's still a lot of work ahead. We returned to the house, which seemed especially empty and quiet after the visit from our grandchildren. I was clearing the dishes, thinking about today and the changes that had taken place over the past 6 months. Later, as Archie and I sat on the porch watching the stars, I finally voiced the thought that had been bothering me. You know, I keep thinking, was it worth it? All this business with selling the house, with the money, with breaking up the relationship. We could have just given Edmund the money and avoided 6 months of pain and separation. Archie shook his head thoughtfully. No, Bea. If we had just given him the money, nothing would have changed. He would have continued to think he could manipulate us. Vivian would have continued to pressure him, demanding more and more. And we would have just postponed the inevitable conflict. But the price was so high, I whispered. 6 months without our grandchildren. Yes, the price was high, he agreed. But sometimes the most important lessons in life come at the highest price. Look at Edmund today. He's changed. He's really changed. And not because we lectured him, but because he came to understand his mistakes on his own. I nodded, realizing my husband was right. If we had simply given in to Edmund's blackmail, it would have solved the problem for a short time, but it would have created fertile ground for new, more serious conflicts in the future. You know what I've realized during this time? I said, looking up at the starry sky. True value isn't in a house, or money, or even comfort. True value is in self-respect, in the ability to live in harmony with your own conscience, in the ability to defend your boundaries, even if it causes pain. And in love, Archie added, in the ability to love, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Yes, and in love, I agreed, squeezing his hand. Without it, everything else would be meaningless. We sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the warm evening and each other's company. There was still a long way to go before our relationship with Edmund was fully restored. Many conversations to be had, many wounds to be healed. But today, the first step had been taken, and that gave us hope. I thought about how strange life is. Sometimes we lose something valuable, a home, a relationship, an illusion, in order to gain something more important. Wisdom, self-respect, a genuine connection with loved ones. Sometimes we have to go through pain and loss to learn to appreciate what really matters. What are you thinking about? Archie asked, noticing my silence. About how our old house was just a building, I replied, and a real home is a place where we can be ourselves, where we are respected and loved for who we are. And today, for the first time in a long time, I felt that we were finding that real home again. Not walls, not a roof over our heads, but family. Archie hugged me tighter, and we continued to look at the stars, enjoying the moment of calm after the storm. Life went on, opening a new chapter in our family history, a chapter that, despite all the trials, promised to be more sincere, more profound, and more real than anything that had come before. In the end, I stated three simple truths. First, you can't change the past, but you can change the future. Second, everyone has the right to their own boundaries. Third, a person's strength is manifested in the ability not only to forgive, but also to make decisions for themselves. And now I want to ask you, would you forgive or would you draw a line under it? Write your opinion in the comments and tell us where you are listening to us from.